Jeff, we've got breaking news.
Oh no! Who broke
Yeah.
it?
Well, NBC News broke the news.
Well, you
Uh,
should put it back together. Damn it!
well, that's it. They're harming themselves
I
by
got
breaking
tape.
news such as that. So it was interesting. An article came out just today from NBC News. They spoke with 11 sources close to Vince McMahon. And I thought that was weird. You never see an article like count their sources.
Yeah, that's
You never
different.
see like we got about 7 sources to verify this. Like it's never been, which
Mhm.
leads me to believe 11 is like a shit ton of sources that they never would have gone with
Seriously.
before. All right, so here's what NBC News has reported, and they're basically saying that Vince McMahon, in the last 3 months since he's resigned from TKO Group Holdings,
Mhm.
has just moved on with life. And so they spoke with a bunch of different sources to kind of say what he's been doing. And it it's an interesting article. So
Hmm.
they report that McMahon has kept busy by traveling and seeing friends, and one of those friends is former US President and WWE Hall of Famer Donald Trump. They are said to be in regular contact. However, a source did note that they do not talk about their ongoing legal problems, even though they have some similar legal problems. You would
Yeah, I
think that they
mean,
would bond over this.
like Trump alone is the only president that I'm aware of that was named in the rape of a 13-year-old girl civil case. So,
Yeah.
they are both
I'm not
pretty
saying
awful
there
people.
hasn't been another
Yeah.
president, but I'm not aware of it.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
no, they are both pretty gross people.
But that's weird that that's actually mentioned here, that they don't talk about their legal problems with each other. And I
Hmm.
wonder, like, what exactly do these guys talk about? Because they don't seem to know anything about the other, really. Like, remember when McMahon, they did that angle where he got
Hmm.
into a limousine and it exploded, and the
In my
story
mind,
is
that's where he died.
that's, well, maybe the real Vince McMahon died then,
Hmm.
but his ghost kept abusing and exploiting people for
Mm.
2 decades after. His evil was just that strong that it persisted after death.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, that happens.
but apparently after that, Trump called the WWE head offices just to make sure that Vince wasn't really dead. So these are a bizarre duo of near do wells. Um,
Yeah.
So they've said some other things here. So apparently he likes to travel a lot. He's been doing that.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
they mentioned that he has not had any contact with TKO Group Holdings management.
Hmm.
So he's had no contact with Mark Shapiro, Ari Emanuel. He's completely out with those guys.
He's selling all
That's
his shares too.
He's selling all his shares. All of his shares have been listed on sale as
Hmm.
on sale. So that whole thing he did to try and get back in the company, the working his way back in,
Hmm.
arranging the sale to Ari Emanuel, putting it in his contract that he was the executive chairman for life.
Hmm.
Didn't work.
Nope.
In the end, there's always someone who can tell you you're fired, and that's what happened to Vince McMahon.
I only really have one comment about this article, and that is simply it doesn't end with him in handcuffs. So I don't care.
Well, it does kind of go over what Vince McMahon's team feels about the ongoing criminal investigation into him. So, according to this article, he has been cooperating with authorities, and this goes back to last July
Hmm.
when as part of a federal investigation. His phone was seized. There was a search warrant,
Hmm.
and there is an investigation looking into the accusations by Janelle Grant and allegations of sex trafficking. So, according to this article from NBC News, Vince McMahon feels that he's not going to have any criminal charges brought against him. He said to not be worried about that. And he believes that there will be a settlement reached in the Janelle Grant lawsuit. However, they reached out to Janelle Grant's legal team, who said that there's been absolutely no discussions whatsoever regarding a possible settlement. And they've said in the media previously that they're not doing that. Like, this is going to go to court.
This
Apparently,
seems to be
McMahon, whether
something
he's
that rich people do now, because we had a recent teachers strike in Quebec, where I
Mhm.
live, and 2 or 3 days into it, the premier came out and was like, "Yeah, we're like inches away from a settlement. We'll have it settled by tomorrow." At which point, the teachers union said, "You haven't even called us."
Yeah, yeah. You have not taken the necessary steps to make that
Yeah.
happen at all. It also mentions in this article that McMahon has had no contact with Paul Levesque or Stephanie McMahon regarding company matters. So it
Mm.
doesn't say whether they've had contact or not regarding non-company matters. As I
Yeah.
like, I would really like to know what that situation is like, though, because this is a family issue. Paul Levesque is running this company. Paul Levesque is the father of Vince McMahon's grandchildren.
Hmm.
Stephanie McMahon is Vince McMahon's daughter, and like, what is their relationship like right now? What like, especially considering both Triple H and Stephanie McMahon, when they were on WWE's board and Vince was trying to get back into the
Hmm.
company, they both voted against him coming in until Vince had board members removed and made it clear he would do that until he was voted back in.
Hmm.
Um, so I mean, it's interesting. Like what is the actual family dynamic like in the McMahon family right now? Are these guys talking with each other? Do they meet on holidays? What does McMahon have a relationship with his
Hmm.
grandchildren? I did see a picture that Linda McMahon was backstage at WrestleMania,
Which is the first we've
and
heard of her in quite some time.
yes, quite some time. So like, I don't know. I don't. I
This is
I don't know.
this is one of the many icky areas of this
Oh
particular
yes.
story, because his family is victimized by his actions. So
Yeah,
they're
totally.
victims as well. And, to have to go through that and have, many wrestlers have talked about how shocked and upset they are because they looked at Vince in sort of a fatherly role. Well, he was actually her father,
Yeah,
and,
yeah,
like, having to deal with that. Now, I also feel that the McMahons are not exactly your typical family.
Oh no.
Like, they and so when they say they haven't been in touch on business matters, everything's a business matter in that family.
Yeah.
So to me, that says they just, maybe he like texted, Merry Christmas or something, and maybe they didn't even respond. I don't know.
Mhm.
But it says to me that's very minimal contact, to say the
Yeah.
least.
Well, it
Um,
says in this
and
article he's oh,
it
sorry.
disgusts me to hear about him like, oh, he's going on vacation, he's catching up with friends. He should be rotting in a fucking jail cell
Mhm.
or dead. And I will
Well,
just put that out there because that's how strongly I feel about it at this point.
this article is most of the sources are named as those close to McMahon. So
Mhm.
uh, just because this article is painting his life now as basically a vacation, that
Mhm.
doesn't mean that's the truth. Um,
I hope it isn't.
Much like Instagram, you can kind of create your reality about the type of life you're living. I did notice in this article they mentioned that he's spending time with friends. It did not mention that he was spending time with family, and that's kind
Mhm.
of what got the ball rolling in my house. Like, what is this guy's relationship with?
Yeah.
Stephanie's backstage with Linda McMahon at WrestleMania. Like, what does Stephanie feel about what Vince did to Linda? You know.
I read an excellent recap of the article,
Mhm.
um, on F4W online, and
Oh, I hear
it
they got
it
some good
also
writers.
told me that, he's been in contact with John Cena and The Rock, supposedly.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like, Cena made waves by not very properly saying how he felt about Vince McMahon,
Yes.
and The
Yeah.
Rock hasn't really made much comment that I'm aware of,
Mhm.
except to say that it's an exciting time, for the company moving forward, and he hasn't really said anything specifically about McMahon,
Yeah.
that I'm aware of. But so, those two guys kind of make sense because I think that they would be just so conflicted about everything,
Yeah.
you know, and that kind of thing. They have relationships with McMahon that, I can't even fathom. And so what that does to their own psyche would probably be similar to what it does to Triple H and Stephanie's psyche. And you know what? You know who's been completely silent in all this? Shane. Haven't heard a word from Shane. We don't know what's going on there. And if he's, if anyone's got reason to be mad at the old man, it's probably Shane, because Shane's been screwed over by his father so many times, professionally and performatively, that like, how could
Why?
he ever want to have a relationship with him? But
That's why, like, I cannot get over how Vince McMahon has treated his children. Like, yes, sex trafficking, awful. But
mm,
like his treat, like I'm not comparing these things here, but um, the way that he ousted Stephanie, like he he ousted Stephanie from her position so that he
mhm,
could come back in. Who does that to their own daughter?
yeah,
Like that, no one was complaining. Like when Vince McMahon, he resigned or he retired. Remember, he retired, and
yeah,
this is before all the different stuff came out. And
mm,
um, we had that 6 month period where Triple H was in charge. Stephanie McMahon was the head of the board, or at least
co
the high
CEO
ranking executive.
with Nick Khan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And it was then that the company started to get hot. Everything started to go well. There is no need for Vince McMahon to come back at all. It's not like the company was failing. The company was doing great. Everyone was really happy. The fans were
mm-hmm.
happy. The people working in the company was happy. Stephanie's leading the charge. Like this is the new generation it always should have been. And then he came in and said, "Nah, fuck that. I only care about myself. Fuck my kids." Like, you
Yep.
know, that he's a sociopath. Like he's got to be. Like
I
to
think. Well,
not
just look what
care.
he did with the territories.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you need a certain ruthless cutthroatedness that at the time everyone was like, "What a business genius," But it's like, no,
Mm,
maybe he actually does not feel remorse, which is a
yeah,
key tenet of being
yeah.
a psychopath or sociopath.
Well,
Like
that's like, but for his own daughter, like it's a part of you,
yeah, I
like
have two daughters. I could not
it
imagine doing something like that.
yeah, that to me is the difference between an asshole and like there's something going on in this person's brain where
Mhm.
they can't have empathy for
No,
anything outside of themselves,
I
right? Like
think that there is a
where
certain position that you get to in wealth,
mhm,
and I won't say success, but I will say in wealth, where you completely lose touch with reality. And people that are worth that much money and can get away with as much as Vince McMahon has gotten away with in his life, it warps their brain and it
yeah,
turns them into things that they may not have otherwise been. If WrestleMania wanted tanked and there was no WWE after that, and Vince McMahon went off to be, a stockbroker or something and lived a quiet life with his two kids and his wife, away they go.
mhm.
I think it's perfectly reasonable to speculate that he would have been a normal person, and just done his
Possible.
thing. But he's had 40 years of being the be all and end all and making hundreds of millions, billions of dollars doing it. And he's skated away from everything he's ever done wrong. And so he feels like, you know what? I am untouchable.
Yeah.
And that is a key tenet of being a sociopath.
Yeah, I think so. It's interesting because like I don't know if his entire family like people don't talk about Vince McMahon
Yeah.
Sr. in this way. People don't talk about Stephanie McMahon in this way.
Mm-hmm.
People don't really talk about Shane McMahon in this way, or like I don't really think so.
And
So
that's what I'm getting at is like
yeah, exactly.
he's had all this shit like experienced in his life that the others haven't. Yeah, they grew
Hmm.
up in wrestling, they grew up with the business and so on and so forth, but like, he's been the forefront. He
Yeah.
was the head of it. He was, and not only just behind the scenes, but also on screen.
Hmm.
And I think that messes with your head too. Like,
Yeah,
and
the whole yeah, because he's in addition to being the head of a company, he's also a celebrity
mhm,
now. Like,
yeah,
yeah. So
Yeah. So, well, we'll see what happens. I would like to, much like WWE has hammered home in recent weeks, would like to move on into a new era, if
Oh
I
yeah.
may.
If I could just
Where,
say
yeah.
like one more thing about this Vince article, and then we'll move on. So the article makes a point of mentioning that Vince McMahon has been in touch with The Rock and John Cena. We don't really
Hmm.
know what the nature of that contact is. Like maybe he phoned The Rock, and The Rock was like, "Fuck you, buddy! Don't call
Yep.
me." I don't know that that's happening, but I know
Beat him
that
with a
there will
weight belt.
be. Yeah, yeah. I know that there will be a percentage of fans who will hear that and it'll be a negative to them about John
Hmm.
Cena. And The Rock, but like John Cena's comments on the Howard Stern show about like
Hmm.
you've got to love who you love and whatever. Like
Like you love
John
who you
Cena
love,
got
but
a
you
lot.
also need to be responsible for your actions, is what he said.
You
Yeah.
do, but how do I put that? I have sympathy for John Cena and others
Hmm.
in his position regarding
Me too.
this. And it's not just because, like, you could say, oh, yeah, well, they feel this way because Vince McMahon made them rich. It's like, that's a
There's
harsh
more
way of
to it than
putting
that.
it. Yeah, Vince and CM Punk actually said this on the MMA hour. Vince, he said that Vince liked to cultivate these father type relationships with people.
Hmm.
And for some people, that's going to fill a void. And they are going to want to believe things about Vince McMahon
Hmm.
because Vince McMahon being a monster doesn't fit with their reality, with what they've seen from him,
Yep.
which could very well be, likely very well is just Vince McMahon showing them what he thinks they want to see,
Yes.
manipulating them in a way. We talked about how Mick Foley had said that Vince McMahon was a very charitable person. That doesn't get
Hmm.
mentioned in this. I was like, no, Mick, Vince knew that you would respect someone who's charitable.
Hmm.
So he, tried to come off as charitable to you.
Yep.
So that's where I have sympathy for the Cenas and the McFoleys in that I feel like they've been
Hmm.
fooled by
Well, the
him.
ability to be something of a social chameleon like that is
Yeah.
another key tenet of psychopathy.
Hmm.
The idea that you can blend
Yeah.
in and be a normal person.
But you
So,
talk about like what a horrible position for someone that prone to like exploiting and abusing people to be in.
mhm.
I mean, he wasn't just the head of the company. He was like in people's perception, he was the god
Mhm.
of that
Yeah.
universe, right? That's probably why he wanted it to be called a universe. And like, well, who created the universe? God. I'm fucking God. Like
Oh
that,
yeah.
so
Absolutely. Absolutely. But
goddamn. But yeah, let's move on though,
mhm.
because
Let's get back to the
the
amazing show that was
yes
WrestleMania 40 that they made us very clear did not
was the Paul
involve Vince
Levesque era.
McMahon. um,
But I think WrestleMania 40 made it very clear that wrestling is doing fantastic without Vince McMahon.
okay, I know we just got
Way
here, but
better.
sidebar,
Yeah. Yeah.
how great is it to hear the words professional wrestling spoken
Yes.
on WWE TV again?
Oh, I like it's those little changes that we see now that
Hmm.
I just love so much.
Hmm.
And like I know there's been all this backlash, like, oh, can we stop hearing it's the Paul Levesque era? Why does
No,
Paul Levesque have to be on every show? Fuck that shit. I'm so glad Paul Levesque. This is the Paul Levesque era. I if we see Paul Levesque on every
mhm,
show, I think that's great because all of the changes that he's making are changes that wrestling fans want.
mhm.
It's the like it's not the Raw tag team titles, the SmackDown tag team titles. People don't want that. They want the World tag titles, the WWE tag titles.
Mhm.
They want the wrestlers referred to as wrestlers. They want it referred to as wrestling. You can still occasionally call it the WWE universe or something like that,
Sure,
but
sure,
don't hide from the other words. Don't
yeah.
hide from the real words, right?
Don't
Like,
ban people from calling it a championship. You know what I mean? Like,
yes, yeah. And it's just those little things where now WWE is integrating back into the wrestling world
Hmm.
after decades of trying to be separate from it. Another
Right.
example of that is Jordan Grace in the Royal Rumble, you
Hmm.
know?
Yeah, that's amazing.
And
That
this
was
stuff has
mind
come
blowing.
out.
You know.
This stuff has come out about how WWE wants to develop relationships with other wrestling companies, which is the exact opposite of what the
Hmm.
company's mandate has been since Vince McMahon bought it from his father. They want to tear down other companies
Hmm.
and make it clear that theirs is better. So we've seen now that they invited Rossi Ogawa and Julia to WrestleMania.
Hmm.
Rossi Ogawa is, he was the co-founder of Stardom. He's started a women's
Hmm.
wrestling promotion
Hmm.
in Japan. We know how Triple H feels about women's wrestling in Japan. He's,
Yike.
bringing in Kairi Sane, Io Sky, Asuka, Julia now.
Hmm.
So he knows that that's a great resource for fantastic professional wrestlers. So he's cultivated this relationship. And, wouldn't it be great if you could take someone who you want to get more experience, like send Maxine Dupree to Stardom. She'll
Yeah, why
come
not?
back a way better wrestler, you know?
Hmm.
so, so
Well,
yeah,
and to me that
it's,
makes so much more sense too than trying to do like NXT Japan and NXT
yeah.
Europe and
Well, I
NXT
think they still
Australia.
are going to do that.
I'm sure they're going to try to do that, but to me, it makes more sense to like the way that, professional sports teams have minor league affiliates,
Yeah. Yeah.
like that. They're not the same thing as the big league team, but they're
Yeah.
involved, and I think that's key to wrestling, and having NXT as your gateway doorway
Mm-hmm.
keeps Raw and SmackDown at this elevated level too, where it's like, that's still the top of the mountain for anyone in professional wrestling. Like
Mm-hmm.
AEW is fantastic, New Japan is great, but you want to go to WWE at some point because it's just so much bigger. And
It's
now
the
that
largest
WWE,
stage in
yeah,
wrestling for sure.
and now that
And
they're bringing back a lot of those pro wrestling things,
yeah,
it's suddenly a lot more appealing to people who were done with it in terms of talent.
yeah.
You know what I mean? Could we see John Moxley back in WWE one day? It seems possible now
It seems more
if he
possible now
survives
than
that
it
long.
was.
If he
I didn't
lasts that long.
feel Moxley was that complimentary of Triple H in his book. So I don't know if it's gonna
No,
happen.
I don't know. I never
But
read his book,
no,
but
he wasn't like he
CM
didn't
Punk
bash
and
Triple
Triple
H, but
H also had
well,
a lot
yeah,
of,
yes.
and they've
Everybody's able
managed to
to.
patch it up.
I'm sure if John Moxley was offered a ton of money and they said, look, the issues that you had before about scripted promos
Hmm.
and stuff like that, we don't have that issue anymore. And if you still want to go to Japan, hey, we do that
Yeah,
now. Yeah, it's way more. Yeah, I mean, they're gonna keep a lot
yeah,
more guys that way, guys and women.
and they're going to be able to develop people within that system too.
Mhm.
And so when they do go off to do other things, that influence is going to rub off on those promotions. And it's just like, it's suddenly it's a much more global wrestling community.
Oh, I know, but the global wrestling community is like I almost wanted to say it was hilarious, but like it's okay, so there is like proxy wars going
Mm,
on globally that are related to AEW versus WWE. So in Japan, like so what I mean by a proxy war, like how Vietnam was a proxy war of the Cold War,
hmm.
You
Hmm.
know what I mean? Like it's related to it, but it's not actually
But
it.
it's not
So
it. Yeah.
so it's a war of its own, but it's kind of related to this other war. Anyway, um, so AEW and Tony Khan do not like Rossi Ogawa. They
Mm,
believe that Rossi Ogawa was preventing wrestlers from stardom from appearing in AEW. And Tony Khan believes that this is because Ogawa has a relationship with WWE. So Ogawa gets fired by Bushi Road, and he's now got his own company. And that company is going to be kind of associated, not like, I don't know if there's an official association,
hmm.
but some type of relationship exists between WWE and Rossi Ogawa and his new promotion, the Marigold Dream Fighting,
Hmm.
which Julia has been announced as being in. Julia, of course, was shown on camera at Stand
Hmm.
and Deliver, is expected at WWE at some point. So there's some type of sharing deal going on with Julia already.
Hmm.
AEW now and Stardom are associated. So Stardom sent wrestlers for ROH. They've
Yep.
sent some wrestlers for other shows. Mariah May has gone back there. Tony Storm was on their pay-per-view.
Hmm.
So there's a relationship there. So that war that's going on in Japan's women's wrestling between Marigold and Stardom, that's like AEW, so there's like global conflicts going on all over the world as it concerns wrestling. And that also exists in Mexico, actually,
Yeah.
because New Japan Pro Wrestling will only work with CMLL. They feel they have a loyalty to CMLL. CMLL's big rival is Conan's company, AAA. And so you can kind of only work with one or the other. So, like, AEW can't really work with AAA that much because CMLL won't let their guys be on the same show as AAA guys. But then sometimes it happens anyways, and no one seems to care. I don't know. But there is, like, so
Rich
so
people
it's
arguing
interesting.
over action figures is what it comes down to after a while. But yes.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
But now WWE fitting into that because WWE used to try to be separate from
Yeah.
all of that, but now they're knee deep in it.
Yeah, well, they learned that they can still be the top of the heap and acknowledge the rest of the heap.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
AEW is a wonderful thing, and I'm thankful that we have it, and I enjoy watching it. It's never going to get to the level that WWE is. It's never going
No,
to.
not anytime soon. No.
Well,
It's
maybe
it's
in a
it's
hundred
hard
years
to
we'll be singing a different tune, but like
mhm.
it's not going to get to that level of name recognition, of organization, of business acuity. Of they're not going to have they have their all in show at
Mhm.
Wembley, and they've been selling tickets for that for about 2 years now. So I think that they're hoping that it'll have a big crowd, and that's very cool. But they're never going to have a WrestleMania.
Well, look, they're very far behind WWE. But
Yeah.
they can be behind WWE and still be successful.
Hmm.
Um so yeah,
And
like
yeah, absolutely. But there is always going to be a big gap between those two
sure.
companies. You know,
But
and
but who
so
cares?
well, who cares is right. Exactly. But
Yeah.
that's why when Tony Khan starts like doing stuff to like ruffle WWE's feathers,
Mhm.
WWE has the luxury of looking at it and being like, I don't care. Like you're
Yeah,
so
and I
irrelevant to
wish he
me.
would stop that. But
Exactly.
here is the mentality behind it. And he's talked about this in interviews. He was given a book to read by Warner Brothers Discovery about being a challenger brand. So a challenger brand is there's an established number one
Hmm.
and you're kind of a distant number two. And
Hmm.
what this philosophy is if you're the number two, you have to shit on the number one as much as possible and
Hmm.
point out all the things that make your company different. Because one of your biggest target audiences are disenfranchised fans of the number one. That's who you want to pull into your company. I, okay, if that's your philosophy, to me, it I would much rather that AEW just focus on putting on good wrestling
Yeah.
shows. Whenever there are these references to WWE, it felt a little too much on Dynamite last week when we had the footage of the CM Punk Jack
Hmm.
Perry altercation. Of course, and how that concerns WWE is now CM Punk's a big star in WWE. So,
Hmm.
and then after that, Will Ospreay kind of cut a promo that was directed at Triple H. So it felt a little bit too much like you don't want to make your identity as just not WWE. Make
Yeah.
your identity all elite wrestling. I love that tagline they have where the best wrestle. That's a
Yep.
fantastic tagline for them. Lean into that. That's what makes you different. But just, it like all you have to do to be a challenger brand is say that exact line where the best wrestle because it implies
Hmm.
WWE does not have the best. We have the best. And you end up not pissing off the percentage of your fans who watch both, which I think they do when they do this stuff.
Yeah, but I also think that the percentage of the fans that watch both very rarely moves. You know what I mean? Like it's a certain
Yeah.
number of fans that watch both, and that number doesn't really go anywhere. It's you're always trying to attract the elusive new fan.
Yeah.
And WWE doesn't have to do that.
No. No.
Whereas AEW does. And when he goes on, like, and he's got Dustin Rhodes cutting promos being like, I've never won a championship, so I'm gonna take on Samoa Joe. And it's just like you literally just using Dustin at this point and pretending he's Cody. Like,
Here's
and
our own version of
yeah,
WrestleMania
we
for
got
you.
a Rhodes too,
We've
and it's
got,
like,
and like we've got like Samoa Joe is,
mhm.
I mean, he's the closest they have to the Anoa'i family. It's the,
Yeah, and he's not even in that family. He's
yeah,
said in
exactly.
interviews in a
I
few
know.
times, he's like, "There's two very powerful wrestling families. I'm in neither." So,
It's like there's the Anoa'is, the Fatus, and Joe.
yep. And then I just was there. I don't know, but there's so much, and there is so much more that he can do with it. But I think Tony is still, AEW is what, 5 years old.
Yeah, that's the thing, man. Like
Like it's still
it's
very much in its infancy, and
it's
Tony's
very
booking
new.
is too.
And I think AEW's actually gotten to this point now where like the honeymoon period is over and
Hmm.
fans are much quicker to criticize them, right?
Hmm.
Like in years 1 and 2 or 3 or even 3, really, there was not a lot of criticism of AEW. I think people were just happy to have this alternative. But
Yeah.
now that we've gotten into year 4 and 5, it's a little bit more like people want the alternative that they want.
Yeah.
But this is a company that's learning because you saw like in December when they did the Continental Cup, and the
Hmm.
fans really responded to that. It was like that's that this is what we want here. And so Tony Khan said, "Look, all right, the feedback is
Tournaments for everyone.
tournaments are great, lots of tournaments." Well, it's
The
like I just mean to say, like, is AEW perfect? No, but yeah, they're 5 years
Mhm.
in, and Tony Khan is only in his 5th year in professional wrestling in any role.
Mhm.
Before AEW, he just wrote fictional wrestling shows where you're not dealing with talent, you're not dealing with contracts, you're not dealing with people who don't like working with other people. Uh,
Mhm.
all of that stuff is new, or you're not dealing with wrestling fans who all have different tastes.
Mhm.
So again, like 5 years, that's nothing. Um,
Yeah.
AEW has been very successful in terms of they've got 130,000 people that'll buy every single one of their pay-per-views. They're going to be going on HBO Max at some point. They're going to be getting a large renewal from Warner Brothers Discovery. Hey man, that's all stuff TNA, ROH, and all these other companies that tried, they were never able to do what he's been able to do. They didn't have his money, but
Yeah.
still.
Well, yeah, that helps
Yeah.
too, and the
Yeah, man.
ready-made TV deal and all that kind of stuff. And it's just and we're also in a situation now where WWE is thriving.
Yeah.
And when you see that machine firing on all cylinders, it really does make the other ones look smaller, you know?
But
And
can we acknowledge this here that WWE is in a boom period, the biggest since the Attitude Era, and the Attitude Era hit because WCW challenged them for a couple of years, and they were like,
mhm,
better get our shit together, and then they had a boot. So like this is twice now that they've had a major league challenger. I mean, WCW was a bigger challenger to
WCW was
AEW.
more of a
So,
1-to-1.
yeah. So it was different, but you still can't say like that can't be a coincidence, right? Like
Mhm.
that they hit these big boom periods right after they get a little competition.
Yeah, no,
Got to
well,
be, you know,
WWE is never better than when it has its back against the wall a little bit. We
yeah.
know this. We know this. Look what happened. They had planned to do Rock and Roman, and then they could pretend all they want that it was the plan the whole time or whatever, but
Hmm.
no. We know what happened. We were
Yeah,
there. We
but
saw it. Like
and it worked out
but their
great.
ability, yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
And that is where I think AEW is at right now, whereas they can't pivot like that into something better
yeah,
because they're not
for sure.
thinking that much far or that much further ahead. Rather, I
Yeah,
think. And it helps that Triple H and The Rock are the two guys that are kind of like, maybe we should do it this way, or maybe we should do that. That definitely helps because those guys have 40 years in the business, whereas, like you say, Tony has 5.
5.
But
Yeah.
like, it I love AEW. I will watch it because it puts on incredible matches and this kind of thing. But it's the thing I see in ROH all the time too, where it's like you have all this talent and they're just kind of there.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lot of
You know?
talent just being there in
And I can
AEW.
understand why now that AEW is in that time frame where long-term contracts are expiring and people are leaving and promises are now not being kept
Hmm.
because time has run out on them. I think we're going to see a little bit of and also with the totally new culture at WWE, obviously, we're going to see a little bit more, I think, trading back and forth. And while being a challenger brand is great
Hmm.
and it can help it out, how amazing would it be if in 10 years from now, or 5 years from now, or 2 years from now, WrestleMania wasn't just a WWE event?
Oh, like they had companies from all over the world.
It was like a thing, like the Super Juniors tournament that goes on for like 6 months or whatever.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Like stuff like that. Like, what if they
Well,
made WrestleMania into something like that, where like other people's wrestlers could come and be spotlighted, and then suddenly WrestleMania isn't just a WWE event; it's an industry event.
well, it's far
You
more
know?
likely under Triple H's rule, and that's
Mhm.
actually, kind of the idea around bringing Jordan Grace into the Royal Rumble is that you
Mhm.
turn this event into something where you could see people from all over the world. So, like, that idea has definitely cracked, right?
Mhm.
Um, it does sound like Nick Khan is the driving force behind this idea of, of working with other companies. So yeah, I mean, that's not off the table at all. I mean, if you could work out some